Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I say it's a pleasure to take part in this debate. It is the case that the Foreign Affairs Committee, which I sit on, has had the opportunity to question the Minister, the member for South Cardiff, although I have to say I wasn't entirely persuaded by some of his answers. But I'm also welcome two of my colleagues on the Labour benches from the committee and my honourable friend from this side. But that is not to say that the Intelligence and Security Committee, which has other powers, is not an appropriate body which might also look at some aspects, as indeed the Defence Committee, I think, should. In terms of the debate, the one thing which I think everybody who speaks agrees upon is the importance to the United Kingdom of Diego Garcia and the Chagos Islands. My honourable friend, the member for South West Wiltshire, quoted his former boss, Admiral Lord West, who was, of course, a minister in the last Labour government and the security advisor to the Labour Prime Minister, who said that it is no exaggeration to say that Diego Garcia, the largest of the Chagos Islands, hosts the most strategically important US air and logistics base in the Indian Ocean, and it is vital to the defence of the UK and our allies. I have no doubt that honourable members opposite would absolutely share that sentiment. Perhaps not his later comment: an agreement with Mauritius to surrender sovereignty over the islands threatens to undermine core British security interests and those of key allies, most notably the United States. And I think we do need to listen to the warning which he gave. Now, of course, I'll give way.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend, and Admiral Lord West has been referred to twice in this debate so far. He may be unaware of the fact that Admiral Lord West had a letter published in the national press on the 28th of May, in which he talked about the disgraceful decision to hand over ownership of the Chagos archipelago, and added that he did not accept that the move is, quotes, absolutely vital for our defence and intelligence, as the Prime Minister claims. So someone of that calibre and a former Director of Defence Intelligence, I wonder what the opposition backbenchers who've been slavishly reading their scripts would make of that.
I think my right friend is absolutely right. If I might just answer my honourable friend before doing so. Admiral Lord West is somebody with immense experience and knowledge, and actually, if the Defence Committee should decide to look at it, he is somebody who they might well ask to give evidence on the basis of his considerable experience in this area. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Alvin Bailey.
Thank my right honourable friend for giving way. Could he explain how UNCLOS enables intelligence activity, and perhaps then he could explain why we have represented the views that we have on the basis of our experience and understanding?
I want to come on to UNCLOS because it is an organisation that has, as he knows, expressed a view, but it is not one which is binding on the United Kingdom. Indeed, my right honourable friend, the former Attorney General, set out very clearly the various international opinions that have been expressed, but which are not binding or mandatory for the United Kingdom to follow. And that actually is critical to this debate, because I want to concentrate. I'll give way quickly.
I thank him for giving way. Would he please explain then what the limits of UNCLOS are on sovereign space, sea, land and air around Diego Garcia, as they stand and as they are extended in the agreement which has been put?
Well, I cannot answer him specifically on that issue, but I can tell him that what has been absolutely clear is that whatever is the UNCLOS opinion, it is not one which is binding on this country. So, therefore, we will obviously read with interest their view, but it is not one that necessarily we are required to follow. And it is the case that the existing position has safeguarded the interests of this country for a very long period. And therefore, the first question which one is required to ask is, why are we changing what has been a guaranteed security status for this country by handing over the sovereignty of Diego Garcia. And as my honourable friend has said, it is based on opinions that have been expressed, but not ones which we are required to follow. It is, in fact, as the Honourable Member for Crawley said, the original linkage of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius took place and I understand was regarded as a matter of administrative convenience that they were put together. But they are actually 1,250 miles apart. And therefore, on that basis, when the United Kingdom agreed to the independence of Mauritius, it was separated from the Chagos Islands, and there was no suggestion at that time that the two should be linked and that the Chagos Islands should be given over to Mauritius, who, despite the linkage, actually had no claim and no involvement in the running of the Chagos Islands. My honourable friend, who
I thank my right honourable colleague on the Foreign Affairs Committee for giving way. Does he concede the fact by opening negotiations with Mauritius, the last government conceded there was a point around sovereignty to be discussed? And it was certainly, from that point onwards, very difficult to roll that point back by this government.
Well, actually, I would say to you, honourable gentleman, it had already been rolled back, because it was the last government that, he's right, did begin discussions because Mauritius expressed a view, but it was on the basis that a mutually beneficial arrangement could be reached. It was concluded that a mutually beneficial arrangement could not be reached, and it was on that basis that the last government ceased those negotiations. So it's not a question of their being rolled back. It was this government which chose to reopen negotiations that had previously been closed down by the previous government. But I do want to just come back to these international judgments, because the other one, which the government front bench did cite early on in the discussion of these issues when it was first raised, was the risk to access to electromagnetic spectrum as a result of potentially the ITU reaching a judgment which might be based on the non-binding judgment that had been expressed by the ICJ. There is no actual evidence that they were going to do that, but it was possible that they might do so, and for that reason the government expressed a view that it was very important. I would merely point out that the ITU, firstly, has no ability to determine the use of spectrum, as I quoted the minister who answered a WPQ in February of this year, making it clear that allocation of spectrum was a matter for sovereign states, and the ITU is a sort of gentleman's club where they all get together and discuss, but it is not able to hand over the right to the use of spectrum from one country to another. It's also worth noting that the ITU has been, over the years, subject to considerable pressure from China, who actually had a Secretary General of the ITU. And I do recall from my time when I was dealing with issues around the ITU, the real concern at the way in which the Chinese were seeking to use the ITU. So it's, in my view, a very good thing that the ITU don't have the power to allocate spectrum. But there are also strategic concerns which I think are serious and which the government has not yet properly addressed. It is, has been already quoted in the debate, an element of the agreement that there is a requirement in future for us to expeditiously inform Mauritius of any armed attack on a third state directly emanating from the base. Now, when the minister gave evidence to the committee, I did press him on whether or not that would require advance notification, and he gave me, he's nodding, he gave me a very firm assurance that that was not the case. That is of some reassurance, but I have to say it does not go far enough. It seems to me that the fact that we no longer are able to carry out actions from our own base without then having to notify Mauritius and presumably take note of any objection that they have does represent a limitation which could well affect decisions as to where to deploy assets. And I give way to my right friend, who is an expert on these facts.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way again. If it means that you don't have to inform them in advance of a direct armed attack from the base, then presumably it means you have to inform them as soon as possible after such an attack. Now, if such an attack were an overt attack, they would presumably know about it already because everyone would have seen it. So it does rather suggest that they might have to inform them if there had been some sort of covert attack which other people hadn't seen and which they otherwise wouldn't know about. Is that a very satisfactory situation?
I think my right friend makes a very fair point, and it is exactly that that may actually influence decisions as to the use of the base for operations of the kind he's described, if there is a requirement for us then to tell the Mauritians what has been happening from that base. And actually the Minister gave evidence to the committee on this point, I think just a few days after the Americans had launched their attack on Iran, which did not involve Diego Garcia. That was something I raised with the Minister, but I will certainly give way to the Minister.
Minister.
I thank him for giving way, because I know how seriously he takes these issues, and I think it is very, very important for the House to understand on this issue. I can confirm what I said to him previously, but also I draw his attention to Article 3.2b in the treaty and also Annex 1. This sets out very, very clearly that the party shall not undermine, prejudice or otherwise interfere with the long-term, secure and effective operation of the base and shall cooperate to that end. The United Kingdom will have full responsibility, and then it sets out very clearly our unrestricted ability to conduct the operations, including with the United States. So that is very clear, it's on the treaty, and I think it's important the House understands that.
No, I understand that it's part of the treaty, but I hope that when perhaps the Minister comes to wind up, he might address the point made by my right honourable friend that the requirement to expeditiously inform Mauritius, even if it is after an operation, presumably does mean they must do so as soon as possible, and that presumably will apply to whatever kind of operation has taken place using the base, and whether or not that might compromise decisions about the use of the base. The other aspect which I also raised with the Minister when he was in front of the committee was, again, the membership or signatory, Mauritius being a signatory of the Parliamentary Treaty. Now, the Parliamentary Treaty does state that signatories will not have nuclear weapons on their soil. Now, Britain, the UK, is not a signatory of it, but as I say, Mauritius is. Now, again, the Minister told the committee that there was no way in which anything in the agreement would affect the operational use of the base, but he would not go further and comment specifically on the aspects of potentially nuclear weapons on the Diego Garcia base. And this is something of real concern, and I hope that the Minister might say a little more about the conflict between his assurance and the membership of Mauritius of the Parliamentary Treaty, which quite specifically says that there should not be nuclear weapons held on the sovereign territory of signatories. I do want to also just turn to the issue of the cost of this treaty to the UK. We are told there's some disagreement about precisely the figure. I have to say even $3.5 billion seems pretty large to me, let alone $35 billion, which I think is universally believed on this side to be a more accurate figure. But it has been suggested that nevertheless it's a relatively small amount of money and it's a very good deal. I have to say that I recall when this was first suggested, it was when a different Mauritian government was in power, and the Prime Minister of Mauritius at that time had signed a deal which the current Prime Minister of Mauritius described as a terrible deal, and that as soon as he was elected he would reopen the whole discussion. And it certainly appears that he was successful in doing so, and that the sum that is now agreed is certainly the Mauritian Prime Minister has told us is considerably bigger than his predecessor had originally agreed. And this was a great success of the new Prime Minister of Mauritius, but he managed to squeeze even more money out of the British government. So it does beg the question about how much would it stop, at what point does it stop being a good deal? Because the impression given is that the British government was so keen to sign up to this deal, they basically have signed away to almost any sum that was advanced by Mauritius. And I think, as one or two of my honourable friends have made clear, that is going to be a very difficult message to sell on the doorstep at a time when the government is having to make significant savings and to raise taxes. And in particular, I am concerned, and the Minister will understand why, about the impact on the Foreign Office budget, because the Foreign Office suffered the biggest cuts of any Whitehall department in the last spending round, and it is already unclear as to how those savings are going to be met, and there is speculation about how the budgets of the British Council or the World Service or our representation in embassies around the world is going to be reduced because of that. And yet, despite those pressures and potentially very damaging cuts to Foreign Office expenditure, the Foreign Office appears to be expected to meet part of this bill. And the Minister was unable to tell the committee how it would be divided up between the Foreign Office budget and the budget of the Ministry of Defence. And perhaps that's something as well which he might say a little more about when he comes to wind up. And then I also just want to touch on the other aspect of the consequences of this deal, which has already been referred to by one or two honourable members, and that's the impact of the environment. And I pay tribute to the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, who is otherwise engaged at the moment with other projects, I think it's fair to say, but she was assiduous in raising with the Minister her concern about how this will impact upon what is an incredibly important marine environment, and that is recognised around the world. And she has written to the Minister, as he will be aware, saying, "My principal concern is that there is now no funding mechanism in place to ensure that Mauritius will properly resource marine protection in the Chagos archipelago. And without a dedicated funding mechanism, there is nothing to ensure that this protection will continue other than the ongoing willingness of the Mauritian government to allocate resource." Now, as was previously observed, this is an archipelago which is 1,250 miles away from Mauritius, and I think we are not entirely convinced that the willingness exists in Mauritius, which the government appears to be pinning their hopes upon. And finally, I do want to recognise the presence in the gallery of the Chagosians. It is right that they have been very badly treated over the years, and it is of concern to me that they appear to have had virtually no input into this agreement or consultation with them. And I know that there is a contact group being established within the Foreign Office, but there is some scepticism as to whether it's actually ever met or how many staff are going to be allocated to it, and perhaps that's something which the Minister might also... the Minister can give further details in his reply, but I'm pleased to hear him say last week. So, as I say, I'm grateful to the government for answering the questions so far, but I have to say there remains an awful lot, and the answers that I have heard have failed to convince me that this treaty is either in the economic or the strategic or indeed the environmental interests of this country or indeed the Chagos Islands. Yeah.